So, guys, I want to talk about AEW Dynamite, and I do want to mention that I didn't watch last week's show because honestly, I didn't want to watch a 3 hour Dynamite. And then also, too, I do not like it when AEW does something like, say, we have a 3 hour show when it's actually 2 hours of Dynamite and 2 hours of Collision, or 2 hours of Dynamite and 1 hour Collision. It's two separate shows, not one show. So I didn't watch last week because of it. But this week, I was doing an experiment where I was going to watch at work a little bit, but then I saw that they didn't upload the AEW Dynamite show. So what happened was while I was cleaning rooms, I was able to watch AEW Dynamite, and there's a lot of things that I want to talk about. That I wasn't really into any of the matches tonight, but I was really just critical of the booking. That first of all, you had Lee Moriarty versus Hangman Adam Page for the AEW Championship. It was an open challenge, so I really did not like this match for a lot of reasons. That number one, Lee Moriarty is a really great wrestler. I'll give you that. But why is he wrestling Hangman Adam Page? Because Hangman Adam Page is the champion, and it's kind of almost like, well, what has Lee Moriarty kind of done, really? The only thing that he's done is that he was a hometown hero of Pittsburgh. So why isn't Britt Baker getting a women's championship match? Why aren't you calling CM Punk for Chicago? So that's not really a good excuse to have Lee Moriarty in this. Because it's almost like, what happens to Lee Moriarty after this? Is he going to go back to Ring of Honor? Is he going... Is Shane Taylor going to have a talk with him by saying, hey, you had a great performance. Now it's time that we strike, and they attacked Samoa Joe and Hobbs, and then you set up Shane Taylor Promotions versus the Ops, which I think would be the best direction, really. Have different people, because there's a lot of people kind of complaining about a lot of repeat stuff. And Shane Taylor, Samoa Joe on the microphone, that would spit that hot fire. But just to have Lee Moriarty out on this and have no epilogue to this was not good. And then the second thing that I was suggesting is that they should have had Konosuke Takashita versus Hangman Adam Page. And then what you do after that is that you're like, okay, well, I would make it go to a 30-minute draw. He doesn't get the job done, and then Okada is like, I'm going to get the job done at Wrestle Dream. So you set up Okada versus Hangman, and Okada versus Hangman should happen at Wrestle Dream. It's an Antonio Inoki tribute pay-per-view. It's to celebrate Japanese wrestler and Japanese wrestling like Forbidden Door. I know it's a little bit of a repeat, but it's almost like, wouldn't it make the most sense to have Okada? And also Okada is holding 3 belts, and he's held the Continental Championship he's going to hold it for about 2 years, really, or a little bit longer than that. So it's almost like, I'm saying to myself, why it would have hit a lot to it would have done a lot to hit it in my direction. The next thing that I will say is that after that, you had Gates of Agony versus Brodito for the tag team championships, and it's almost like, I'm happy with this in some areas, because honestly the Gates of Agony, they've been around AEW for a very, very long time, and it's kind of like, they need to be pushed, you need to do stuff with them. But the problem is that, isn't it Ricochet's goal to kind of do something where he wants to gain the tag team title? So I really think that you could have had one of the Gates of Agony members, or you could have done something where they challenge for the trios title or something like that. I think that having Ricochet get involved and having Ricochet not actually, win or be in the match itself, it's just kind of like a little bit of a repeat. It's almost like, now, what do you do with Ricochet and the Gates of Agony? Because you just put them in a spot for a championship and they lost, really. So do they just, jump ship and just go on to the Ops, or do they just float around with no direction, really, And like I've said before, that you have a lot of great trios teams, so it's a little unfortunate you're not really developing them. You have the Hurt Syndicate, you have Ricochet and the Gates of Agony, you have the Ops, you have Shane Taylor Promotions, you have Dalton Castle and the Outrunners, you have LFI, you have the Bullet Club Gold, you have the conglomeration. So it's almost like, hey, why are we not investing in, those people? It just makes no sense, really. The next thing that I want to mention is then after that, you had Mark Briscoe, and that was the best thing about the show, was that Mark Briscoe was saying his partner, he's going to keep it kept to himself really. And then it's actually, Orange Cassidy because he's wearing the glasses. He's just going crazy. And like I said about Mark Briscoe, he needs to keep doing this, talking crazy and whatever, like talking scat and whatnot, because this is going to make him a star, really. Like, I think that, Mark Briscoe should challenge for the AEW Championship in the future. If they have a heel at one point, I really want to see Mark Briscoe challenge that heel because he's kind of like the modern day Mick Foley in AEW. So he should do that, or he should face Okada, or he should face, Kyle Fletcher eventually. Like Kyle Fletcher versus Mark Briscoe in the future would be great. They actually did a few segments, and one of the segments was that they had a match between the Don Callis family and the conglomeration. So Orange Cassidy came out, and what happened was that Don Callis had a painting set up, and what happened was that it was that Orange Cassidy was actually inside the painting box, and one of the Don Callis, I think it was Rocky Romero, charges through and he knocks it down really. So you had like your 48-hour film projects by. You're trying to make the Don Callis family look like this big powerful faction, but now you're doing something where they jump to stupid comedy. And then the next thing about that, on top of that, is with the Don Callis family is that they have the match, they lose, and Kyle Fletcher says, I'm not going to challenge you, Mark Briscoe. I'm going to challenge Hologram, so it's streak versus title. And I like that, but the other problem is that why do you target Hologram? Because I think Hologram should have a story. There should be context. Saving Mark Briscoe versus Kyle Fletcher for the pay-per-views would be good. That would be a great pay-per-view match. They both have story. A guy who's privileged and versus guys who privileged, he joined the faction to gain power versus like Mr. Blue Collar, like Mick Foley versus like a Randy Orton type person. The overcomer versus, the I'm willing to get my people together to help me out, really. The next thing is that they didn't set up Okada and Takashita, and that needs to be a match for the show, for Wrestle Dream. That has to happen if they're going that direction. It's Okada, Hangman, or Takashita, Hangman, or Okada, Takashita. That has to be in that pecking order. And I think on top of that, I wouldn't even mind if you did Okada Massacre Dorada for the Unified Championship or the International Championship and get the title off him or something like that, really. The next thing that I want to say is that they announced later on the show it's going to be Darby Allin versus Jon Moxley in an I Quit match at AEW Wrestle Dream. I don't like this for the reason that they've done multiple hardcore matches. In the beginning of the year, it was Kyle Fletcher versus Will Ospreay in a steel cage at Revolution, at Revolution, and then at the Elias Kura Center, they did some ladder and table spots in the Swerve and Moxley match. You had Anarchy in the Arena, and you had I think it's all. Then you had All In Texas Death Match, and then you had Forbidden Door Lights Out match, and then at All Out you had a coffin match. Now you're doing an I Quit match. So I think that there has to be a point where they're basically the Combat Zone wrestling spot of AEW, and it is running in repeat mode. This is kind of like their Conway Twitty gag type of thing. So that's just not good, really. You just can't have so many repeats. The other part of it is that I was suggesting Bryan Danielson and Darby Allin team up against Jon Moxley and Daniel Garcia. I think that would be the better match to have because it gives us a little bit of a break of Moxley and Darby Allin in a hardcore match, because you have to build upon that. You have to lead to an exploding barbed wire death match or blood and guts match or something that's kind of like, a big, finale if you kind of keep up in the ante with the hardcore stuff. But I think with AEW, they've developed a reputation of hardcore but there's no like blow off really. So they have to kind of think about a final blow off with Darby Allin and John Moxley, because it can't be like, you're off the wall combat zone wrestling shit with no like, this is the ending that we have really. This is like the match, a match of hardcore shit. And that's how we're going to end the feud. And then we're going to move on to the next thing. And then what I want to say on top of that is that the main event was Mina Shirakawa versus Chris Statlander. Yes, it's good that women main event. Yes, it's good that the women's title and the men's title can main event a show or open a show. But I think that Hangman should have ended the show and they should have had a challenger. That would have been the best thing, really. I think that Chris Statlander ending the show with Mina Shirakawa. Most people don't know who Mina Shirakawa is, so it's just like a really weak ending. And then that's when it was kind of announced that Statlander's not part of the Death Riders. And then the next part of it is I Quit match between Darby Allin and his flamethrower and John Moxley. And like I've said before, that it's a little bit in repeat mode. Anarchy in the Arena, Darby Allin used the flamethrower. When you look at the Coffin match, they've had matches like that before with people going through like, the coffins or other shit. When you look at the ladder match, some of it was a little bit of a repeat from Full Gear like a few years ago. So I really think that this is all repeat wrestling in some areas. I definitely will say that, my birthday, is this weekend. I will make time to watch the show in West Virginia, which is Collision. And I will review the show a lot more. I want to sit down and watch it a lot more, but I do think that AEW's in repeat mode. And I think that, as I said, this needs to be a year of building new stars. And I actually am a little concerned because I don't believe Anthony Bowens and Max Caster had a tag team match. Didn't they say that there's going to be a tag team match? But or is it going to be on Collision? I'm not sure. I think there are other matches that, I missed out on as well, really, that, I just saw a little bit on television. But overall, I wasn't really invested in the show. But in the future, I will say this. I experimented, and my experiment was like, okay, don't work while watching AEW, because I still want to watch the show and analyze it for you guys. So going forward, I do want to review the show. I do want to mention as well on a personal note that I do live with family. My family wants me to move out, get my own place. They want me to do it by my 40th birthday, so like I pay rent, I'm a man, I have responsibilities, I've traveled, I've done a lot of really great things, I'm not a gold digger, but I would love to review professional wrestling, I'd love to do travel videos, I would love to gain my subscribers and do a lot of shit for you guys. I would like to do more fantasy booking if you have any ideas and other shit like that, and other things like that. Like honestly, I want to be more self-reliant. I do work about 130 hours every 2 weeks, so like 65 hours to like 80 hours a week, and then I'm expected to do overtime on top of that at the hospital that I work at. So I do want to say that I think going forward, if you want to see fantasy booking videos, if you want to say, hey Byron, you know what, we're watching your videos, this is why you don't have a lot of views, this is how we can help you out, just help me become better. But I will also be watching other people's channels and learning how to get better as well, really. Like I just want to make sure that I'm taking steps forward to grow myself and grow this channel, because I love this. I really love this platform. I want to keep it going as long as I can. But I also understand, too, that, life gets in the way. And I think one thing I want to tell you about life is that ultimately we go through good times, we go through bad times. But you don't let the bad times change you. You don't let people change you. And sometimes life is almost like, a farm. Sometimes you start out with dirt and shit. Sometimes, like a farm, you work on something and it could be destroyed and whatever, and you still have to keep going, really. So you have to build yourself upwards despite the hard times. And I think that my brother, who taught me, and he really helped me get, my passport, the thing that I've struggled over 20 years to get, like this means the world to me. My brother helped me get that. But I will say this, that, the next thing he expects from me is to move out in a few years. I will pay off like $50,000 in credit card debt, student loan, IRS debt. That's probably all that told together, really. But ultimately, you know what? I'm at the point in my life where I need to kind of like, hit hard, really, because, I do want to do this for a living. I do want to keep going to AEW shows. I do want to kind of keep improving. I do want to do things a lot better. But I need to be more bite than bark, because that's been my life. I'm more bark than bite, but I need to be more bite than bark, really. But I appreciate you guys. I want to improve. I need to improve. My life depends upon it. My happiness depends upon it. And I'm 38 years old, 39 years old. It's about picking up my ball.